I know a lot of people. We have the sending claim.
Okay, tell us what people think about Seattle if you're not from here.
The weather sucks.
But it doesn't sound as Chicago.
That's what I told them. Have you been?
It sucks compared to Singapore and San Francisco, definitely, but not compared to other areas.
Oh, so the company was founded in
It's a smaller geography, so you are not getting cornered.
Mountain View.
That's where it's I would say.
I don't know if it's just size. I don't know what size. I mean, I've got girls and they're nice.
From an area to another.
This is veggie. So you're gonna ask me. So everybody has to reach out to you, so we're probably do that on top of the platform. Wi-Fi out there. We don't create our own cells, so we create a template for AWS ARM for Azure, so we use that. We build a visual action which allows us to be able to deploy templates. We're startups, so we're still on version 2.2 of the product. Easy. I got some better things. We don't know what the startup rate. We don't always get a website, but all our applications have yeah, we've had complete governance. Yeah, sounds good. Ignore the whole. My name is Rex. Where you can go is over there. The last wall. All right. For your laptop or your car. Chicago and
Lost it. So go back.
First one.
So one important thing is they want to get all the data out of the person so they can give it their content ID. So we are creating some infrastructure to do that as quickly as possible.
It was sitting here.
The services, so then they can target and call.
What do you mean by hybrid? Right. Again. So I guess the smaller companies, everything's out there. The quality. Just to win. Managing enterprise.
So I mean,
NASA, space system, satellite launch. Commercial, but pretty much based here. Factory down in Charleston.
Yeah, I have a couple of friends who started and it's pretty hard to go. They can't do anything. But there's so many things if you're working in something, you get this. Just move things down the line and get to enterprise started. We have already done our
You're moving from what? Yeah.
It's great, yeah. But you're education from Singapore our whole family was in contact with my uncle. I've been married for 5 years.
So far, you're still connected.
Yeah, hopefully that happens.
All right. Ready? We'll get going. Everybody finish up grabbing their pizzas. All right, so just so first off, I'm Jim Palmieri, Toddy Mladenoff in the back. We're the co-organizers of the event. Some logistics, restrooms out the door. Wi-Fi is, we moved it, I think it's on the post over there in case you need it. There's a raffle at the end, so there is, if you go to the Cloud Talk site, or if you could read that, we've got a giveaway. So you go in there and put your name at the end, we'll raffle off. We've got a couple of Amazon Dots. In addition to co-organizing this Cloud Talk, we've been doing this for about 5.5 years. We also run Agitair Technologies. So we do work in cloud architecture design, applications development, big data analytics, modern build pipelines, security. We're a partner of Cloud Enablers, which we're excited to have talk tonight. So, and we're also a Azure CSP, Tier 1 CSP. So if you need Azure, let us know. So just a couple things. We've got a great lineup. We're starting to get some really good speakers. So October 10th, we're actually doing a talk on security, and it's a webinar. Toddy's going to be running it, so it's out on the site. October 12th, we've got Elasticsearch coming in. They're going to talk about ELK, you know, past, present, and the future. So we had a really good good discussion last time they came. A company called Tibco coming on October, they're later in October, right? I can't remember yeah. They're going to talk about low code development, going from the ideas to apps very quickly. And then Oracle, we've been asking for Oracle to come. We finally got somebody to talk about the Oracle Bare Metal Cloud. That's November 2nd. And we're starting to line up speakers for December, January, and February. So if you've got an interesting talk, or if you want to sponsor an event, just reach out on the site. Be happy to talk to you about an event. And I think I've got Microsoft coming to do blockchain. So I'm talking to the blockchain product team because we've had some requests for that. I'm excited tonight to have Cloud Enablers. We've got a great discussion about security and governance. What I'd like to do is introduce Mike Stipe and Tony Ryland. Mike is the Chief Revenue Officer. Tony's VP of Sales Engineering. I'll turn over to you to Mike.
Yep, great. Hey, thanks everybody for coming. We're real excited to be here tonight. Real looking forward to Tony's talk here on governance and security and cloud. A lot of things going on, and we'll talk through that. Go ahead and hit the next. So a little bit about Tony. There we go. So Tony's the VP of Sales Engineering for Cloud Enablers. He's one of the lead architects for the product core stack. He's been in the space, cloud space, for almost 10 years now. He's at Cisco for 9 years, so he's been around a lot and has a lot of good experience around this. So I get to hear him all the time. You know, being the head of sales and him being the head of pre-sales engineering, we're kind of like Batman and Robin. So it's great to see what he's come up with for this.
Who's Batman?
You can be Batman, I'll be Robin, right? You always make me look good, so that's what's important.
Robin's a small guy.
Yeah. So with that, we're gonna vulnerabilities that have been exploited and organizations have been known by IT before they happened.
For at least 1 year, if you read the report. At the last slide too, I have all this information. I have links to all this information so you can read it yourself. But to me, that was eye-opening.
Very, very, very telling that IT organizations just really don't have a good handle around security and governance. It's something that's needed really, really bad. Go to the next slide. The next piece is that a third of successful attacks were experienced by enterprises will be on their shadow IT resources. Again, shadow IT is a big problem right now. We'll talk through that. And it's interesting how you look at the vulnerabilities and how things are translating into issues. You see the targets of the world. You just saw Equifax, right? 143 million users. Unfortunately, me and my wife were 2 of those users. So it's going to be interesting to see how things kind of play out in the next 18 months.
Yeah, one other thing to notice here. So Gartner also puts in some recommendations of how to solve this issue. And their recommended action, which is really interesting, it ties into tonight, is users will engage in tools that help them do their job. Right? That's the whole start of shadow IT, and that's what's kind of firing off that conversation is they're looking for ways to make their job easier, and they're going to adopt those no matter what. Even if your business and you have a code of conduct that says not to do something, if it's going to make their job easier, a lot of times they will utilize that application, that feature, etc. And so it's a big push on companies to find a way to track shadow IT, but without blocking it. So they need to find a way to track shadow IT, but also be able to create an environment where you have acceptance and protection versus detection and punishment. So I thought that was interesting. It ties into tonight really well.
And then the last piece here is that by 2018, they say that the need for prevention of data breaches for public clouds will drive 20% of organizations to develop a strategy, a data security governance strategy and program. So you see that coming out now. Last year, it wasn't a big push. This year, it's a very large push, and so you're seeing a lot about that. You see a lot of talks coming out around governance, around security, and you'll see where that's going. And Tony will go through that a little bit. And one of the recommended actions here was to develop an enterprise-wide data security governance, a DSG program. We needed another acronym. We don't have enough in our industry, so we've got another one here. And this is one of the reasons why cloud governance is important and why we chose this topic for tonight. Yep.
I was just wondering how much of these, vulnerabilities exist on the big 5 cloud service providers, and how many of these incidents that you're talking about have actually happened with the top 5 when hosted with the top 5 cloud service providers?
Yeah, so there's actually the link that I pulled this information from is part of this presentation. It has a ton of information about that, and it talks about companies with over 5,000 employees up. It talks about kind of the Fortune 1,000, 500, etc. in that space. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was an astronomical number. It was like 40% have known vulnerabilities, and and they just don't know how to fix it, they don't know how to solve it, or the other 60% was driven issues that came up. The other 60% was driven by internal error or shadow IT, someone provisioning something and not realizing they left it open, and that's allowing someone to get into.
On one of the top 5 cloud service providers or on?
Yeah, when you look at,
on-premise?
both AWS and Microsoft Azure, both have had outages, right? And so, I'm not gonna say exactly what caused those outages, but I would bet, both of my daughter's college funds, and they're 4th grader and an 8th grader, right? So I'm pretty near and dear to those, that it was around security that caused those outages.
Thank you.
And right, it's not the service provider's fault, because necessarily the enterprises, and it's mostly in the enterprise space is what that this report was talking about, but most enterprises, they're consuming the cloud services, but it's up to the enterprises to develop some governance and security strategies.
Well, and you look at it, I mean, no cloud is equal. You look at, in AWS, they've got AWS Inspector, which is their security suite. In Azure, they've got the Azure Security Center. Those tools are there for you to use, for organizations to use, but if they're not actually using them and deploying some kind of security policy, different areas that they need to look at and watch out for. Say for an example, if you've got a policy engine and you got this SSH violation, is there some remediation happen? Is something gonna go out and close that hole so you don't have that vulnerability? And that's why I said 99% of the security issues that organizations had, IT knew about it, but they didn't do anything about it, or didn't know what to do about it. And that's what he's gonna talk a little bit about. Talk about the things that are going on and some of the ways you can change that. How you can flip the script, and how you can now get out of that paradox where you're having these security issues, these governance issues. You look at regulatory stuff, around HIPAA and whatnot. There's a lot of things now that's happening. You look at both AWS and Azure, both now have FedRAMP certified clouds. So a lot of things are really changing. You look at today versus where it was even 12 months ago in the cloud space. People now it's now not just for DevOps, right? It's now people are moving their core workloads into the cloud, and a lot of that is because of governance, because of security, because of policy. How do you really look at how you can have that journey to the cloud, and how you can make sure that you don't have those vulnerabilities?
All right, so the first step for tonight would be to define cloud governance. So this is a general, generic definition that I kind of put together. I stole it from a bunch of other definitions. There's a ton out there. There are some groups that are trying to make this uniform and build a, what's it called? A publicly adopted or
A standard.
A standard.
Yeah.
They're trying to standardize this. But for right now, it's kind of all over the place. So it's a pretty generic, but what I put together was cloud governance. It's a framework to define the decision-making process, the criteria, right, the people, the functionality, etc., and the policies involved in architecting, securing, adopting, consuming, operating, and managing cloud computing resources. So it's really wordy, but it's if you look at it from a high level, and we'll go through this more in depth. A good example that we can use to walk through this is we look at government, right? Governance, government. So we look at the government today from an organization level is executive, legislative, and judicial. They have a strategy in place. If we look at the 4 pillars, they define and administrate laws, police and judge those laws. There's accountability and reporting, and then they provide resources and assets to the people, us. They do that and focus on that across the board communications, one of the foundations. And so from a high level, that's right, a really high level, in maybe an idealistic government. Obviously, our government's a lot more complicated than that. But from a high level, those are kind of the 4 pillars that follow a government model today, or what we would hope. So we'll tie back into this. There's a ton of frameworks on the internet of different standards and how you can adopt cloud governance with IT governance, and now the new security governance, and how that works with DevOps, SecOps, AppDev, etc. But I tried to make a real simple framework that when you leave here, you could take this back to your businesses or your workplace and be able to fill out a framework and be able to identify a governance plan, at least from a high level standpoint. So from the abstract view, basically what governance is, it's to ensure that we are doing the right things. Goal or the focus of it is governing the use and not blocking it. And this is important, right? When we talk about shadow IT, line of business users are going to find ways around IT to make doing their job easier. Focus is mitigating risk versus the rewards. And at the something that's not talked about enough, but it's encouraging innovation. For any enterprise out there, you want to encourage your users to innovate. We want them to have roadblocks slowing down their innovation process. If they need new resources, they have a new idea. You don't want them to wait 3 months before they get access to those resources and start innovating. Now, if we look at the top 4 challenges, I'm just going to build these out. Security and compliance. So from a security standpoint, obviously access, security, pretty straightforward. I'm sure we're all extremely familiar about that. Compliance, Mike talked about a little bit. Just as a show of hands, who in your business vertical or in your work has some sort of compliance or regulations that they need to adhere to? Show of hands. Okay, about half. All right, that's about what I was expecting. So that's quite a bit. So there's another study on here that you can look through. I didn't want to get into it too much today, but it talks about how enterprises in the IT compliance space, 60% of them cannot even keep up with the standards and regulations and compliance that they need to that they have currently versus all the new ones that are coming out. So it's very interesting. This is an area where companies are really putting a lot of investment into creating a compliance organization or a unit inside the business to help them manage this process. And again, that ties back into, well, we're consuming cloud, consuming resources and vulnerabilities. So being able to track that. I know for like SOX, the compliance regulation for lawyer firms, most people that I talk to think, well, that just means I need to keep everything behind a firewall. But realistically, that's not the case. You can put that information wherever you want. You just need to be able to define where it is and be able to track its movement. So there's a lot of things like that as it relates to compliance, of ways that compliance don't need to be roadblocks, but just you need to be aware of them, you need to build your practice around them. Provisioning, that's another big one. For those that are have order resources or VMs, how many need to wait more than a week in order to get those? A month? 2 months? 3 months?
I've still got servers that we ordered 2 years ago that we're waiting on.
Oh.
We're giving old one, yeah, I mean, but it's politics, I think, more than.
Yeah, a lot of red tape, exactly. But, and the reason that's there is in most enterprises, the traditional way of doing things, if I was an application developer and I wanted a server for my new application, I would have to order that server. There was no way for me to get that unless I had one at home or I had, I bought a server myself and stuck it under my desk. Oops, excuse me. But now with cloud being so easy, and usually you can get into the free tiers the first year with AWS or get a $300 credit with Azure. It's easy for them to just start firing up those servers and moving applications and workloads. But again, that brings up compliance and security issues. Spending is another top of mind one for customers when we're talking about governance. Not only trying to control the spending, but just getting visibility into where this spending is going and who is utilizing that. So part of this whole governance package, which we'll show you in a little bit here. Visibility in operations. So being able to tie all of what we talked about into IT ops, IT governance, and then sec governance, SecOps governance as well. Okay. So we look at governance as kind of 3 main stages. There's the beginning stage where it's minimal integration. This is where most enterprises that we talk to are at. They're real reactive environments. Lots of cost overruns, VMs sitting out there not being used, resources not being used or underutilized. Tons of different disparate tools depending on the user. You may talk to one user that uses Chef scripts to orchestrate their cloud. Another one's using Puppet. Real disparate. There's no communications. It's not cohesive. as we start to work with companies and talk with them about building out their governance strategy, one of the best practices is creating a cloud center of excellence or a cloud steering group. And I'll walk through that here in a few seconds. And as part of the optimize stage as well, that's where enterprises are starting to really notice that, all right, we got all these resources, they're sitting out in the cloud, we need to kind of rein this in. This is usually where Mike and I will get engaged with customers, is they're reaching this point and they know they need to do something. They've either invested to try to build some tools, put some tools together to do this for themselves, or they're looking for some assistance. This is also, again, where Toddy and Jim can come in from a consulting basis and help do assessments, help companies realize what they need to do to help build out their governance and leave them with a package behind. Also, this can be, I'd like to have this interactive, so as I'm going through this, please ask questions. If you need me to explain or if I'm going too slow, tell me.
Tony, define cloud when you said cloud. Are you assuming that the environment is necessarily a multi-cloud environment?
No.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so when I'm talking about cloud, I just mean any infrastructure that we're treating as a cloud environment. So you could have private cloud infrastructure in your own data center. You could be utilizing AWS, a mix of different cloud ecosystems. Also, you know, in the industry standard, you're also talking about Dropbox and things like that. When I was at Cisco, we had a tool that would scan networks, and we'd go to these large enterprises and say, well, how many clouds do you think your users are using? And they'd say maybe 5, 10. They would get thousands, 1,700, 1,800 different cloud environments that sharing pictures, social media, Dropboxes, all of those different applications where people not knowing any better, where, you know, me as a sales guy, I say, oh, hey, you need something? I'm going to send this document in Dropbox and I'll pass it off to Mike. Well, guess what? That's exposed now to the world. And, you know, a lot of times you can search for private documents, but you can read it out. If you've seen that in Google, you'll search for a document, you may see the first 3 or 4 lines. You can't open that document unless you're in the intranet or you're been secured. But still, that information is out there, and so that's a huge risk for people. I hope that answered your question. I kind of got off on a tangent there. Yep. All right. And then the third stage is maturity. This is where they've built out their governance practice and they're using it. So they're really automating. Thank you. Automating their cloud infrastructure and their services. They're really benefiting from the cloud. There's, you know, the reason why everyone moved to the cloud, that's still there, but now with all these security risks and vulnerabilities, a lot of companies are starting to take a step back or just taking a fresh look at their investment in the cloud space. As well, when they hit that space, as enforcement and security.
So these 3 stages are really key. You look at the journey that an organization goes on. So in our conversations, we find people that, you know, there's organizations that are born in the cloud. There's what I call more brick and mortar organizations, right? And so how mature they are in their cloud journey almost defines where they are in their governance journey. You know, whether they're just starting, you know, whether they're starting to optimize or whether they're mature, almost kind of goes back to whether or not they were born in the cloud or whether or not they were brick and mortar, like where you're at, you know, JP. Right, you know, that's an old brick and mortar, and you know, everything, it's like a big boat. It's like when I worked at Motorola, right? You try to get anything done, and you know, it takes months. And so that's something to really take into consideration when you're looking at, you know, your governance model and you know how you're building it out. Where are you in your cloud journey, and how do you kind of intertwine, you know, what you're doing and how you're going to look at your business for the next 18, 24, 36 months?
Yeah, thank you. So just to add a little more detail about phase 1, again, it's about creating that, you're starting down that governance path. I don't think I need to beat a dead horse here, I kind of went through this. But what a cloud center of excellence or a steering group looks like is just a real quick kind of basic sample org structure. You want to have some level of leadership, sponsorship, so usually CIO, CTO, or VP of engineering, something like that. To sponsor the group. You can, the role of this, right, is steering and building out your governance strategy for the company. You want to assign cloud infrastructure, DevOps, automation, cloud architects, and security leads as part of this. And then depending on your size, you want to have multiple different individuals as part of that. So line of business users, depending on what size of enterprise you have and how many users, you want to have one from each kind of major silo or bucket, and maybe in a lot of cases multiple. Right now they say about, I think 34% of all enterprises over 5,000 employees have already put this into place and are using this today. So there's a huge gap out there, right, for the rest of them. What you want to do as part of this as well, when we're talking with customers about this, you want to make this something that your user or your individual contributors want to be a part of. Make it, there's other ways to incentivize them outside of just maybe being a resume builder. But if you can make this a place that people want to be a part of it and that there's some benefits for them, and then rotate people throughout there, when they end up leaving this group and going back out to the normal IC world, there'll be a cloud champion for you and kind of help from the ground up, kind of a grassroots type of model. And then, so in stage 2, this is where the tooling really starts to come into play. This is where we're trying to streamline the tooling. Usually at this phase, most enterprises have built out orchestration and automation tools, so they're using orchestration scripts like Chef, Puppet, Ansible, or some shell scripts, etc. Or they're using CFN or ARM or Keaton Mistral templates to provision, so they've defined these templates of automated tasks. Either it's resources or tasks that they need to do on a day-to-day basis, or something that needs to get turned up often. And they've built these templates around it to kind of streamline that process. So they're in that space usually. They're starting to build out their governance strategy. They're also looking at their continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline and how that works from a cloud governance standpoint and how that ties into their software development and release cycle. They're also starting to look at costs, thinking about, well, how can I design for costs? There's a ton of tools out there and resources, especially as you start looking outside of just one cloud environment, public cloud environment. There's things like spot instances, if you're familiar with that in AWS. It's where there are resources that are not being used, so you can grab them and utilize those for an extreme discount. The problem is you get a 2-minute notice from that being shut down, so you have to be on top of backing up whatever you're doing, taking constant snapshots, etc., because you get a 2-minute warning that says, hey, we need these resources, and they will take it back away from you. So there's a bunch of things that enterprises are starting to look into as well. How can we streamline our costs a lot? And then how can we, again, look at what costs are there, who's using what, how. As we look at stage 3, the maturity stage, this is where they're really focused on agility, enforcement, resiliency, and cost reduction. So how we're doing this, and I'll show you this here in a few minutes with our tool set, is automating the whole process from the team that's developing the application or developing whatever, all the way up in through operations. When we talk about cloud lifecycle, right, the cloud lifecycle has a start and an end. There's provisioning, maturity, deployment, as you walk through it, and then there's termination or decommissioning. As we start talking about governance as a whole, that doesn't have a start or an end, which is why we call it a framework instead of a life cycle. So we're starting to, companies are at this phase have that integration with their governance plan all the way through that cloud life cycle from start to decommission and onwards. Once it's been decommissioned, what's the next step? Is it secure? Is where you back that up, is the data secured at rest, or is it just sitting there out on Dropbox? Is your code sitting in GitHub? Is that environment secure? So all those things are part of this whole governance package. Then as far as cost optimization and reduction, auto-scaling, that's a big one, and descaling. So being able to monitor your resources and be able to add additional support if needed, and then tear it down. Or idle. Having an orphan VM sitting out there, that's something that plagues enterprises today. I think there's like 40 to 50% wastage. I have some numbers on that I could share as well. Wastage on resources just sitting out there that they don't even know about.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So very specifically, how do you mitigate some of the risk with your development team itself, like code reviews or just within that life cycle of delivering? Is there any advice you have on that, like general practices or stuff you've seen?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on what their software development lifecycle is, like, you know, whether they're waterfall, if they're following agile methodologies, etc. But as part of that, you want to build in a practice that as they're releasing software, depending on what frequency that comes, though all of that is built into your governance plan. So you have policies in place that follow your governance practices and make sure you're following compliance regulations, security, everything else as part of that release cycle as well. Does that answer your question? I mean, so I'll get into some of the specifics. Yeah, here in a few minutes. And then as they're into this phase, again, it's streamlining tool sets, minimizing risk, and benefiting from cloud services. All right, here's what a just super high level framework looks like. I just pulled it off the internet. Again, it kind of walks through the whole cloud life cycle, but it's focused on people, processes, and technology. So people from an access and security, who has access to what? Processes from your policies and business processes that you need to follow, whether that's compliance or any of the other things that we'll talk about here in a second. And then technology. What sort of resources and applications do you want to make available to your users to help, you know, make a frictionless environment for them to be able to innovate, be able to be agile, and not be have IT not be a roadblock in their innovation cycle. Okay, so, as part of this, so this is really high level. There's a ton of really complicated frameworks out there of how you build out a governance framework. I just want to do, I kind of think I've come up with a really simple way for us to build out a framework that I think you guys could take home with you. So by going back to this government framework, if we just start replacing that with what we need in the enterprise and cloud space, first we'll have the Cloud Center of Excellence, or your cloud steering group, right? That group of individuals that's going to be developing and coming up with what your cloud strategy should look like. The focus, or your plan is going to be around agility, security, enforcement, resiliency, and cost reduction. This group will be designing and developing what your processes and policies will be. And again, these policies and processes are not always business related. A lot of times they could be security related, access related as well, which I'll show you here in a sample I have, and which I'll roll you through when we do a product demo here in a few minutes too. Okay, so create the policies, processes. We need to secure and police, right? This is following along with the same framework from the government. We need to have accounting, be focused on cost reduction and reporting. Who's doing what? How can we verify the outcome of what we're building? And then the application, right? Your shared resources, infrastructure, apps. What do they need in order to do their job? What tooling? So that kind of makes up a very simple, high-level framework, and we'll walk through this here in a few minutes. So if we were to build some policies for an environment, and this is built out to kind of show the demo as well. So as I'm walking through this, be thinking about it from a cloud lifecycle standpoint, and then I'll show you how I'm putting all of these different policies in place with our platform, with the CoreStack platform. Okay, so from an access policy, it may be creating IAM access, right? Pretty straightforward. Who has access to what? Image access, so what images do they need access to? Which regions do you want them to be deploying these resources in? Service access, so what services do they need to have available? Again, these are really basic, but the reason I did this is it'll tie into the demo here in a few seconds. From a security policy standpoint, things like when they deploy these resources, make sure that they don't have 0.HTTP or SSH ports open. Making them or securing that process so that when those users request resources, they are already secure and are following these policies. From a utilization perspective, is there a way to be able to take automated snapshots, clean up old snapshots, be able to dissociate volumes or disk policies if needed? What about inactive user policies or inactive resources sitting out there as the way to de-escalate or turn those off, turn the lights off at night type of thing. From a capacity policy, same kind of thing, creating some thresholds that you want to meet as an enterprise and being able to tie those in to your platform or to your cloud usage. And then from a cost policy, budget allocation, is there a way to not only see what, from a cost analytics and budget perspective, who's using what, but if that ties into what our business goals are. Data redundancy, just talking about, do we have old storage out there? One of the things I can show you, or I'll show you, is how we can utilize the platform to go clean out all your old storage, old snapshots, things like that, so you're not paying for that storage cost. Although storage is relatively cheap, it's something that enterprises have a huge focus on, is shrinking their storage footprint. And then when we're talking about enforcing these policies, so all of this really is around prevention. And most companies, enterprises in the security and governance space focus most of their attention on preventing at-risk to happen. There is a lot of investment in detection as well, but then what happens, this is where it starts to break down. Once a problem is detected or a process or a policy isn't followed, what do we do? How do we do that? So being able to tie that in again with your whole cloud lifecycle and your governance strategy is key in order to, well, not be vulnerable. So having either an automated or an alarming monitoring system as part of that, so that any resources that are or configured out in the cloud have to follow these processes and policies that we set out. If they fall outside of that, having some sort of detection and resolution method. Yeah.
Yeah. Structurally, they call this business continuity. And so there might be somebody else in the company that isn't technical who may be in charge of business continuity. But they're over things like fire drills and, you know, it's kind of non-techie stuff, so they may not be the most appropriate person, but sometimes it gets passed on to like HR. So you, from a structural standpoint in a company, what or who is the best qualified person to kind of integrate a say business continuity structure like this for security, like the data breach protocols and the you know, if you get hit with a giant EMP blast or whatever, you know, from a technical standpoint, who's the guy?
So that will depend on the enterprise and how they're made up. But what best practice is, right, it goes back to that center of excellence. They should have that, at least one of those people should be a part of that conversation, be a part of that steering group. You know, same thing with legal, finance. Every avenue in your business should have a foothold in that space or in that organization that you're putting together in order to have a say and be able to define what the plan is if that happens, what the plan is to identify it, and then what the plan is obviously to correct it. Does that answer your question?
No.
I mean, it's all over the board depending if you're talking to, right, school districts are totally different.
Yeah, I was going to say that, each organization is a little bit different. So again, this isn't from, you know, how you do fire drills and where the exits are or whatnot, right? So first, it starts, you know, from the business leadership, which could be operations, which could be IT. It really depends on the organization. It, you know, could be engineering, right? That sets the direction. But each organization is going to be a little bit different. But first, you got to do is you got to put together, you know, what are your policies? What are the things that you need to make sure that are enforced? And then you kind of start from there. But unfortunately, there isn't one place fits all. It really is. But it typically starts with business leaders setting, you know, this is the direction, this is the policies we need to adhere to, these are the things that can happen, these are the things that can't happen, and then figuring out how you're gonna manage that.
And this is all obviously about cloud governance. There's obviously business governance, IT governance, security governance. So there's a ton of other avenues that all make up your complete governance for businesses. All right. So all the things we talked about, from a policy perspective, being able to have centralized policy management for, you know, prevention, detection, and correction is key for this to happen. And so one of the things that we always talk to enterprises about is it's not only just about preventing shadow IT and enabling kind of a self-service IT environment to streamline the process and get rid of the friction for innovation, but it's also, and following compliance, policy, security, etc. You need to have a centralized place, because as soon as you don't have a centralized platform, that's where your policy roadblocks will happen. So if you have a detection, you have your prevention put in place to prevent it from happening. Now, if you have your detection software or policy manager, and it does not talk to, and there's no automation built in or alerting function from a correction standpoint, that's where your things start to break down. The last big outage we saw at AWS a few months ago was because they had seen an alarm pop up and someone had just not looked at it for a while. I don't know if you saw that outage. No one was looking at it, even though they got thousands of alarms, and there was no automated process to fix that. There was no escalation process put in place that says, after so many alarms or so much time, if someone hasn't solved this, what's the next step? So none of that was thought about. It was just real reactive. We get an alarm, I react, what do I do to fix it? The user at the time did nothing because they thought it was not a real alarm, and it ended up taking some services down for a few companies. And one of the case studies, before I go into the demo, is one of the largest telcos that we have that we worked with and talked through all of this with them and built out the platform for them. One of their main challenges was just being able to give or provide the infrastructure to the users. Their process was long. It was months. Once a resource or a VM was requested, it took months for them to deploy that, which again is a barrier to success when you're talking about innovation. Low infrastructure utilization, so they had a private cloud environment and a public cloud environment. Overall, the utilization as a whole was sub 20%, which is not good. We talked about the solution as itself. The goal was to automate the cloud lifecycle process start to finish. So again, what we talked about, developer request resources. Is that an automated process? Is it approved? Is there budget for it? If not, throw up a red flag. If so, allow that resource to be provisioned. Utilization, again, orphaned resource. We talked about cost reduction. We talked about a lot of this stuff. And then increased portability. That was the other big one that we're starting to see with companies as well. Is you've seen enterprises that have invested in a single cloud. Now they want to be able to, whether it's for high availability or load balancing or for whatever other reason, maybe Walmart came out and said everybody needs to get off AWS and move to Azure, which happened. They're looking at, how do I take my investment that I've already made in the cloud, how can I move that? How can I port that over to another environment if needed? Or port it over to my own data center if I have the space?
So, so this, we're talking about everything is in cloud, right? And then we are providing a solution. So in this, scalability is already there in cloud. So how are we providing an extra scalability option?
So, sorta, right? So they have scalability services, but not only is that those services cost a lot more in a lot of standpoints, we're talking about scalability outside of a single location as well. So everything we talked about, it has a play in a single environment space, but most companies nowadays are invested in 2, 3, or more different environments or ecosystems. So how do they take that and make a unified governance plan or strategy to be able to do that across all the different ecosystems or environments? Does that make sense?
No, I have one more question here.
Okay.
So these cloud services already have pay-per-use concept. So how are we helping more to them?
Yeah, there is pay-per-use, but there's still a lot of wastage. VM, so they request a VM and it sits there for weeks before the developer starts utilizing it. Or on the flip side, maybe the developer gets done with the project early and it sits there for a few months. So yeah, they have some monitoring tools that will monitor CPU utilization and things like that. But that ties back into, well, how are we automating that process? If you're having low CPU utilization, if you just get a flag and it's showing up in your Azure portal, who's looking at that? Who's gonna go make that change and shut down that machine, right? So being able to automate that process to say, all right, we hit this threshold, whether it's a time that says we want this resource to be terminated at a specific time and to automatically terminate that, or we could say, all right, we want to hit a certain threshold, auto scale up, descale, or maybe if it hits idle for 8 hours, let's go ahead and back it up and we'll terminate the VM or turn it off. So there's a bunch of other things that you do outside of that, right? So if you take Azure, for instance, or AWS CFN, with the CFN template, you can't stop an AWS EC2 instance, right? You have to log into the portal. So how do you automate that practice? So a lot of people, they'll create like an API and they'll go use that to automate the process of stopping VMs when needed or terminating VMs. But again, that's another kind of configuration entity, another configuration tool set. So being able to consolidate that for all the different environments and tools into a single place is a powerful conversation for customers anyways.
So think of it in a multi-cloud scenario. It's
Yeah.
going to be useful, much more useful than a single cloud scenario.
And a lot of it, it's looking at, have you ordered the right resource? You know, sometimes people over order, sometimes people under order. So do you have the right, storage, the right CPU? Do you have the right VM size? And so that's what a lot of, the governance goes around and looking at it, are you, doing a daily or a weekly resource report to see how utilized that is, that's how you can help them scale properly.
You done? What's that? Oh, yeah, I was gonna jump into the demo. Can I use that chair? All right. So we'll do a quick demo of our CoreStack platform. Again, it's or not again, we haven't talked about it yet, but it's a multi-cloud governance orchestration automation engine. I'm just going to show you real basic what we talked about from a policy standpoint. So I'll log in and show you what it looks like from an IT ops and how that IT ops defines what their self-serving catalog looks like and what policies they have. First though, I'll log in as a consumer, right? So this would be a developer, or a QA tester, app dev, production, whatever. Someone in that line of business space that's developing or requesting resources will request some resources, and then I'll show you what it looks like from an ops, and then we'll go back and see those resources and make sure that those resources follow the business process and policies that we put in place.
So before we do that, is everybody registered?
For the raffle?
All right, so
Do you want me to
people
show that
coming late,
again?
yeah, just we want to make
bring
sure
that up
because you've got to register to be to qualify for the raffle. So I'm not sure if everybody's done that. So because we'll do the raffle here in about 20 minutes.
It's on the Cloud Talk
Registered,
website.
you mean you signed up on the meetup?
No, on the meetup page, there's this registration link.
Okay.
So you can use your smartphone, or you can go into that, just go into that URL, and you'll
Okay.
see a little form there that you can put your name and contact information, and then we'll draw from that at the end.
Does everybody have that link? Does anybody need it? Okay. Is it getting hot in here? Is it just me? Oh, as part of this as well, so being a Cloud Talk member, we're offering a free month of CoreStack. So you can go to our website, cloudenablers.com, and there's a link for a free trial. Go ahead and sign up. Or actually, no.
I've got it on
yeah.
the Cloud Talk site.
Yeah, there's a registration page on the Cloud Talk site. The free sign up we have an enterprise and a professional version. The free sign up gets you professional version, but if you go through the Agitar sign up, you'll get and Cloud Talk.
One month.
Yeah,
You
1
got-
month
you
and
got a slide
enterprise.
at the end too, you can
Yeah.
put up.
Okay.
1 month of enterprise.
Yeah, 1 month
Which
of
is really
enterprise.
good.
All right. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as a developer and request some resources. Right. The idea again is to make this frictionless for the user so that they can innovate. So first thing you'll see here is they have an app catalog. And these different catalog entries could be anything from just pick and choosing an application or a VM with an operating system to a full environment. So as part of the Core Stack platform, IT operations, which I'll show you here in a few minutes, is gonna define what this catalog looks like, and it's based off role-based access. So who the user is, what level of access, and what tools they need to have access to. So depending on the user, we may have, some of our customers will have a QA guy that just provisions the same environment every week. So when he logs into this environment, his app catalog just has a single catalog tile sitting there to order. He hits that button, he orders a whole 50 VM server farm over multiple different clouds. It fires up all those instances for him, or him or her, and then that's all they need to do. It tears it down automatically. And some, they could have multiple different pre-configured environments or open-ended, right, like ordering something online. That's the idea here. So if we wanted to order up a web server, we'll throw Apache on here, just because then that actually shows you something. We could pick and choose. Again, this is all defined by IT ops, right? It goes back to the people, so access, who needs what, the processes, what are the policies around that, so what level of access do they need, what sort of security do we need tied into this, and then what sort of tool sets, applications, or environments. So for this instance, we give the user the choice to pick and choose operating system, VM size, etc. So I'll just say web server demo. We can also activate on schedule, so we can pre-order these resources, but we always mandate a termination time. What we found with most companies is by mandating a termination time, there's right off the top a 20% savings in cost by unused, by not allowing unused consumption or putting a termination. It can always be extended. So if you make the developer put a time when he's going to be done with this project, not only does it hold them accountable, but that resource will shut down. If they need to extend it at any time, they can log in. They will receive emails that will say this instance is about to be terminated. Do you want to extend that? Or they can terminate it ad hoc if they're done early. Who's going to approve that? We can also add in budget threshold. So do you want to have a certain either time frame or budget that you allow as part of your governance strategy, that you want to allow your users to be able to order on their own? Do you want them to get approval? Is there a budget threshold that says anything over this certain value, we need VP approval in order to get that approved? So there's multiple different ways, again, going back to that, your governance strategy, that you can define what you want these processes to look like for the user from a consumption basis. So the user will place the order. In this case, I had that resource need approval. So what I'll do is I'm going to log in as the manager or the approver. This manager also will receive an email, which here I can show you real quick. It's all part of this. Again, we're trying to streamline the process. Says ABC developers requested some resources. Right from here, the manager can hit view request. It can also be SMS text. You can do it right from your phone. They can go in and approve or reject. They can modify that order. Let's say they've requested it in a certain cloud environment. They know they have a bunch of infrastructure sitting in their data center, so let's move it on to a virtual environment or into OpenStack or on a bare metal server if needed. They can approve or reject. Also, they can modify the time, they can modify the complete order. So they request a month, but I know as a manager, we don't have a lot of budget, and I'm pushing him to get it done in 2 weeks. Maybe I set it to 2 weeks, and then if that user needs more time, they can request additional time then. Okay. Also, as part of this, the manager or the approver can pull reports on their team and look at what users are doing what. Right? And it gets extremely granular into not only the infrastructure, but the cost of the operating system, the application, etc.
So when you think about it more, just even if we were just focused on one provider like AWS, if you set it up in here, would it go then propagate all of the kind of structures and cost centers and everything in AWS? Like, you know, they have those new where you can do all the tree structures. Would it then, in your system, would it be a single point, and then it just kind of replicates to all the other cloud vendors as far as the structures for tracking and cost?
Yeah, exactly. So all of that is defined by IT ops. Of course, it just failed because the demo gods are wanting me to for some reason. So we'll go look at why, actually. Sometimes that's a good thing, so we can see what the issue is. But you can see here that it failed, but if it didn't fail, you could actually track the process of that being provisioned. And then once it's provisioned from a user perspective, they can log in and look to see what they ordered, what this resource is. They can log into it directly from a console, URI or a browser-based console, or they can SSH. This goes back to two of what level access you want those users to be provided with. So again, this is defined by IT ops as part of your governance strategy, but in this case, it's user access, not root access. So being able to define that for the users of what level of access to these resources do you want to allow. And then it will show you where the resource has been provisioned, etc. So let's log in as an IT administrator. So there's multiple different tenants. I'm doing this demo a little backwards, but there's multiple different tenants as part of our platform as well. And so a tenant could be just a silo of configuration tools. It could be maybe a separate tenant for each business unit or division. Most customers will have a single tenant environment, or maybe one tenant for production, one tenant for all development, testing, etc. I do all my demos in that ABC demo tenant, which is where that ABC developer user is a part of. So this is where we define, well, first let's look at what we do to define that application catalog, and then we'll go troubleshoot what the issue was. But we see here I have my different cloud accounts, and then what I do, to go back to your point on where you want these to specifically to be deployed, this is where you will provision where either location, resource group, any specific subnet, VNet, etc., where you want that to be provisioned. So most enterprises will have different resource groups or subnets for different users, roles, for production, non-production. So this is where you define that. So where are they allowed to deploy these resources? This is where you choose the operating system. Again, these are all pulled directly out of the Azure Marketplace, so you can either have your own local images and put them into CoreStack, or you could drag it right out of the Azure and AWS marketplaces right into the environment. It's extremely easy. Just hit the plus sign, choose the image that you want to run and make available, and add it into your options. Same thing with VM size, applications, and workloads. So apps, usually these are just going to be specific application. Workloads will be full environments. So these are going to be based off of templates. I know we haven't really talked about the platform as a whole, but one of our differentiators that nobody else in the industry does is we use all the cloud native DSLs, so domain specific languages for all the different environments. So any investment that a company has made in the cloud, all of that is pulled into CoreStack and you can start utilizing it day zero. In every other CMP in the market, they have their own DSL language that they need to recreate everything in their own language. They do that for multiple reasons. One being because they have their own API stack, and the second for vendor lock-in. So we have a new vision. We're trying to disrupt the market in that space, and so we kind of have the open source native DSL space. So any templates or orchestration tools, whether it's Chef, Puppet, Ansible, PowerShell, or CFN, Heat, and Mistral for OpenStack, or ARM for Azure, all of that can be pulled into CoreStack and used immediately, right out of the marketplace. There's no coding that needs to be done. So again, it kind of streamlines that process, as well as these templates. Here, I'll show you one. These templates can span multiple different environments. So we have a template marketplace. There's about 300 templates that are shipped standard. I just have a real basic one right here for demo purposes, but this deploys a Sugar CRM. It deploys the application server in the OpenStack public cloud and deploys the database server in AWS. So what we could do is I could pick and choose the different templates that I need from all the different cloud providers, or I could have multiple different templates from the same cloud provider, bundle those together as a workload. So then when a user clicks that one catalog tile, it could go run all those templates. So it could actually, with a single click, build out full complicated environments. which actually Azure's Salesforce is gonna start using CoreStack for their own proof of concepts. So to streamline their process so that their sales engineers, when running a POC with companies, will be able to log in and they'll just gonna order up the environments, whatever the POC is. Okay, and then as I talked about, same thing with the scripts, right? Pull any type of script. You could have it automatically pull straight from GitHub. You can pull it straight off your desktop or any other online repository, pull it into the platform, execute that as part of your workload. All right, so let's, any questions so far?
What about existing inventory, so, of services, so let's say they have tons of servers, EC2 instances on AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform. Does the Cloud Enablers CoreStack go out and pull that inventory in and put it in a unified environment, so when they look at it, it'll still distinguish it by provider, but it'll basically look like the same, more of a unified platform. How does it go out and actually pull that inventory? What's the process there?
I'll show you right now. So this is where you add in your different cloud, either private or public accounts. Once you add in your account credentials, nobody take your video recording this, aren't you? But you put in your subscription ID, application secret, what roles or what users you want to have access to that environment. Once you do that, CoreStack will log in. Within a few minutes, it will go out and pull down all that information. And here you can see the different resource groups that I have available as part of that account. Different locations. I deploy everything in West US 2. And this is where I can see the actual instances that I have running out there, what images I'm using, security groups, networks, etc. And then all of those resources get pulled into our inventory pool. And then we can start running whatever. We could set up monitoring to do auto scaling. We could auto shut down, turn the lights off, you know, at 5 o'clock every night if it's an application that doesn't need to run. One of the things I did for my kids, they play Minecraft all the time. I pulled down an Azure template that creates a Minecraft server for them. They have their own login. They can only do it for 1 hour. And on the weekends, they can deploy that. They play Minecraft servers deployed. They can connect with their friends and play, and then after an hour, it tears it all down. Yeah, so there's a ton of different applications for.
They're happy for an hour, then they're.
Oh yeah, it always it's an hour's never been enough. That's for sure. Okay.
So how is network and CPU utilization managed? Like, what is the percentage of CPU CoreStack uses on the VMs?
Yeah, so what we do, again, this kind of goes back to our vision of being that consolidation. I guess I haven't gone into the vision. This is kind of a weird way of doing it because topic specific and not product. But so we use best of breed tools. So how I'm using in this demo environment, for instance, I have integrated with Nagios and Zabbix. And how you do that is you go here to integrated tools. And you can add in your Jenkins account, Nagios, Zabbix. There's a ton more in here now. This is just my demo environment. Yeah, they're actually missing a bunch. There should be Logstash, Elastic IP. There's probably 10 or 15 more integrations that we have as part of the platform out of the box. So what you'll do is you add in that Nagios, and then I will run a template against that instance. Here, I'll just show you. So I'll have a template in here that will say, I want to install the monitoring agent on a Linux VM or Windows, whatever you choose. This will run that template, go install that agent, and then I can start creating a transaction. So then I can run a template that says, during a certain threshold, go ahead and fire off this script which does X, Y, Z.
So it's not like regular, there is no bandwidth which is used regularly on any VM which I create.
Yeah, and so, again, back to when we talk about cloud, so we support VMware, bare metal servers, serverless architecture, Docker. We're adding in integration for Kubernetes from a container orchestration, the big cloud players, and we're adding more every month.
So I think what I get your question, right? So how we deploy, we have 3 different options, right? So we have a SaaS-based option.
Oh.
No, that's not the question. The question is...
Or we install CoreStack in a VM, or we install it on-prem? You're wondering if Core Stack is using any utilization or using a VM?
I think it's probably question
Is that what you're asking?
Agent-based or agentless?
Yeah.
It's agentless.
Well, it depends on the environment, right? So with Nagios, for instance, you install an agent. If I was using like Azure's native tool or AWS's, that would be different. They monitor that for us, then we just create a trigger to do something once we hit that threshold. So it depends on what integration tool that is in the platform, or how you're integrating, or what you're using to monitor that.
So Core Stack doesn't install an agent, but if you're using a monitoring tool that requires an agent, like Nagios or whatnot, they have an agent that goes out. We're just pulling that information into the platform and allowing you to view it in a single console.
In simple terms, Core Stack is a SaaS service, right? Wherever it is running, whether you consume our hosted service or it is on a data center where it is hosted for the customers, managed, it is a SaaS service.
You started your speech today talking about security. So how do you improve security?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Jeez, I got way off topic here. So that, it goes into our policy engine. So this is real basic for today. So this is where you will put in all the different policies that make up your cloud governance. So this could be compliance related, any of those policies that we had talked about earlier. So you put them into our policy engine. This policy engine, depending on how you set it up, I have it set up to automatically scan all my infrastructure. So if I go directly into the AWS console, provision up some resources, the Core Stack will go scan that every hour to make sure there's no policy violations, nothing that falls outside of this. Then I can choose to either throw up an alarm or go ahead and auto-correct that issue. Right? If it's an SSH violation, I can have it automatically go shut down that port, right? Or shut down that violation.
What is SSH violation?
What's that?
What's that SSH violation?
Oh, so like leaving 0 dot. So I just have real basic ones in here. So yeah, see, we bundle them together now in a single template. But basically what I'm saying is not allowing SSH or HTTP management of that resource without defining an IP address. So if someone wants to fire up some resources, don't just leave it open-ended so anybody can log in, right? Creating an access list or a policy that says only certain IP addresses can access this resource sitting in the cloud, right? So all of that is defined here in our policy engine. So you'll define all that. It will make sure that everything, whether it's being consumed through Core Stack, if it's being consumed through Core Stack, it's automatic. You have to follow this policy or it won't deploy the resource that we've defined. If I were to bypass or just go straight into the portals, right now Core Stack, the way I have it set up, is to go pull every hour. It goes out and does a scrub, looks for all new instances in the different environments, and then will show me in my policy dashboard here what violations I have. And so I can look at those specific violations and see what instance, like someone fired up an instance in Aurora Cloud, and these are the instances that are violating that have 0 dot open for SSH and HTTP. So I could then now click on those and go run a template to close those, or create an automated task that says anytime that happens, do it automatically. That's open-ended. So, don't know why it's failing. It's not even telling me. Properties. So I got to look into that. Any questions with it? With that, that's the end of my demo.
Around the governance piece.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If you guys, if this interests you, and you want a deep dive demo on the full platform, I'd love to show you anytime.
Integrate with Active Directory?
Yep, so we integrate with Active Directory and LDAP, so you can have all of that controlled. We have extremely granular role-based access, so if you look into the role and user, we could get extremely granular. So we either define a role and then put users as part of that, or it could create a specific role with a user attached and give them different rights. So you could create different roles or users. Holy cow. You could create either tie definitions and policies to a role or to a specific user. There, jeez, that was hard to say.
That's good.
Yeah.
One question that comes to my mind is, if I have to compare your framework with, say, AWS console, and so the level to which, or the specific level to which I am able to define my policies, security groups, access permissions, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Is it more granular than AWS provides, or is it at a much higher level with preset rules? Where does it compare with, say, AWS console?
Yeah, so the key really is to just make it easier to consume and frictionless for other users inside of your business. Our view is to, again, going back to the native DSL support. So anything that's been provisioned in AWS could be pulled into the CoreStack platform. So right off the top, you may say, well, then I'm doing basically the same things, but our attempt, or what, our vision is to consolidate that whole workflow. So we integrate with like Jenkins, so you can add in Jenkins as part of this, integrate that into this pipeline. We integrate with the Security Inspector, again, the other tools. So we're trying to take not only just what AWS does, but everything inside as well. As well as that, from a differentiator, we can also include into our inventory pool any type of compute instance, whether it's servers, containers, virtual machines, or bare metal utilizing Cobbler, or any network, switch, router, storage appliance. So we can give customers the ability, now, yeah, if they're 100% in AWS, that's all they're ever going to do, probably not a ton of value. But for a lot of customers today that we're talking to, they want to be able to deploy, let's say I want to have the front end of a 3-tier web app, I want to have the front end and the database sitting in AWS, but I want to have my application running locally in my own data center where I know it's behind my firewall, and for whatever reason, that's what I want. CoreStack could actually go, not only provision that in my vCenter environment or VMware environment, but then it could also create a VLAN to segregate that from the network, put an access list, go out and put a firewall policy in place. Anything that you can write a script for, this can execute that script and that device. So it kind of gives them the option and freedom to pick and choose what tools they want to use in order to solve their business needs, what environments. Our vision and our trademark is cloud as code.
Before we do that, so the other thing, if you log into the AWS console, very basic, very not that intuitive, right? That's why they've come out with the EC2 System Manager. But again, very limited. We're actually in discussions with them about integrating the EC2 System Manager into CoreStack. Again, it's about making it easy for you to consume and in your cloud journey, right? They don't do a good, and that's them telling us they don't do a good job of that today. They make it very difficult. And then the other piece is there's very few organizations, even small organizations, are a single cloud, right? Or just an AWS, right? Or just in the cloud, right? They have some bare metal or whatnot. They don't do anything with that, right? And so again, we allow you to look at, our whole goal is that it shouldn't matter what the infrastructure is, right? Whether it's bare metal, whether it's private, whether it's public, whether vCenter, whatever it is, it shouldn't matter, right? What should matter is, are you getting the business apps that you need to run your business? And that's what our whole goal is in our journey, to make the whole cloud as code and to make the whole cloud lifecycle accessible.
Here's one other thing.
That's our vision.
From a differentiator,
Not
we have
100% there yet, but we're close.
We have a I wasn't going to get into this, but we have a drag and drop template building tool that we can use for any of the different cloud environments. And so literally, I already built one. In this environment, if let's say I do want to create a template to deploy a 3-tier web app, I literally just drag and drop 3 EC2 instances over. I add on a VM image, and then you can actually click on that and put in your specifics, naming conventions, things like that. If you want to create a new image, use an existing image. I'm going to drag in our volume, right? Straightforward. Most enterprises we're talking to today use some sort of consultant or something to help them build out their templates. They could take anywhere from a week or so. Let's say, here's something that is hard to do in AWS. You want to create a whole new VPC with this 3-tier web app running in it. Need to add in my subnet. I could add in load balancing. all of that, user access, access list, we'll just keep this straightforward. Now we wanna add in the different applications, so I'll drag Python on one for my application, we'll use WordPress for my front end, and then we'll use MongoDB as my database. Okay, pretty straightforward. When we hit build, it sequences out the different events, so you can see there, right? First it creates the VPC. It doesn't matter how I drag and drop, I'm just trying to solve a problem or trying to create an environment. So I just drag and drop what I need. Our template builder will put it in the right sequence, and then from there it will write out the template. So this is the 1,000+ lines of CFN or Mistral. And this, you can deploy Mistral against AWS, but I wrote it in Mistral, so this is the template that would deploy that 3-tier environment, right?
So within 3 minutes, he built out a template that services companies will charge most organizations anywhere from $3,000 to $12,000 and take about a week.
We're also coming out with a template conversion. It's not in CoreStack yet, but we'll be able to take environments and convert them. So if you're in one environment, you want to convert it to a different language. So again, we're trying to go back to our trademark Cloud as Code. We're trying to be able to treat all the different tools, cloud environments as being able to empower businesses to be able to just consume whatever they need in the way that solves their business goals and requirements. Right?
So one of the areas where cost optimization actually is implemented is about the testing, you know, when you're running some tests for a certain period of time, then deprovisioning everything. There's an automation that goes into it. Is there a provision for automation here for this tool?
Yes, absolutely. So
Because for Amazon or for Azure, I can do that automation with scripting. And
yeah, so all those will be put into here, into our templates or our script marketplace, and then you can automate those by, you can either schedule them. So let's say I wanted to,
Yeah, there's an automation engine inside of CoreStack.
yeah, so let's say I wanted to pull a resource summary every Monday morning. I could schedule this to run whatever task that is. That could be cleaning up old snapshots, again, clean up different accounts, looking for idle VMs. This could be anything you want. You could either schedule it or execute it.
and I do it one time on CoreStack and then later have a choice whether I want to execute it on Azure or AWS.
Yeah, that's the key, right? It's a two-edged sword for us. It's easy to onboard the platform, but then, right, everything that, well, so if you use the template builder, if you're in the raw native language, it will work. But any template you bring in from their marketplace, in or out, yeah, it's the exact same. Same with the scripts.
And the access controls, policy, security groups, provisions of access, role-based controls and everything would just be implemented specific to that environment with same amount of assurance.
Yeah, so it depends, right? If it's their native language and it's a template you got from them, yeah. Or if you created for that environment and pulled it into here, yes. If you created a template that deploys in multiple different environments or adds in some policies, right? So we're not stuck to, if you wanted to deploy against AWS, for instance, we're not stuck having to write everything in CFN. We could take that template and then add some other entities or policies as part of that template or script that may not deploy if you were to take that out. So it just depends on what that script or template is. Does that answer your question?
So we have the ability to create workloads. So to do, for example, if the QA department needs to have 100 VMs or 100 server farms set up to do testing for a week, right? We can create a catalog that goes off and runs this very elaborate configuration and goes off, and that we could be using some templates that were pulled in from the Azure marketplace. It could be pulled in from AWS. It could and then we can build that and then deploy it. And so it's when you do stuff within the platform with the template building engine, it gives you more flexibility to use it within in-cloud. But when you pull something in that you've already created outside of it because it wasn't done, now we'll continue to work on the visualizer and the engine there to at some point where no matter if it's done outside or done within, then you can deploy anywhere. But today we don't have that capability. If it's not, if that template wasn't built within CoreStack.
So we can discuss with them privately.
Offline.
Yeah, let's go offline.
Live
No,
use
good.
cases,
Yeah,
which
okay.
is being used. I mean, what you see is more like a model. When you implement this use model to your specific use case, we can show you some live customer cases.
So will it support the PaaS services too, or because it looks like you support the infrastructure, like automating the infrastructure things, right? So you support PaaS too?
Yeah.
So like for instance, Azure PaaS services, right? Web apps, API
Yeah,
management.
and actually, one of the real neat things, again, but going back to that, supporting the native DSLs, native languages, is when a new tooling comes out, like when Azure came out with the new container service, it was in ARM already, so we could support it day one. We didn't have to wait for the API stack to get upgraded and then configure our language to support and go configure against that API. If it's in the native language, we can deploy it against it right away. So it also makes us be able to support new services really quickly. So anything that can be done in CFN, anything that can be done in a script can be pulled in and executed. And then can be created as part of a workload and given to the users inside your organization. Wrap some policies and governance around that so it's secure and following what it's supposed to. And that streamlines the process of them needing access to stuff to innovate. Right?
What's the category of the product? I mean, you have deployment.
It's a CMP, cloud management platform.
It's a cloud management platform, okay?
Right now, if you really look at it, that's a industry known category.
That's a
right?
broad
So,
category.
Yeah, so
Cloud
what
management and governance platform.
we are trying to define the new definition of governance, of multi-cloud governance, which is evolving, will be probably one of the early stage players there. So to answer this question, the template builder, what you saw, right? I mean, he was dragging and dropping not just the VMs, but the services.
Oh, okay.
PaaS is natively supported.
Oh, okay.
So, for others' knowledge, PaaS is, it's available as a service, right?
Yeah.
You just consume a service. So either you, if you are a techie, you know how to, instantiate a service and use it, you build it, or the other tools that are available, that makes it available.
Yeah,
easy for you.
because the reason I asked is like how to configure whether we can configure the policies, right, for the PaaS services.
Definitely, it's natively supported.
Natively supported.
So you wanted to buy this tool for like a large enterprise, but only a specific team was gonna start out using this? Like, how would that work?
Yes, tier-based pricing, so just how many VMs you're gonna manage or instances. We could talk about that.
Do you have the last slide?
And hopefully, again, the whole goal was to talk around governance and security. Hopefully we gave you some good things to think about, and where the market's going, where the technology's going. We tied a little bit into what we are doing at Cloud Enablers to help with that problem. But the goal was to talk about, how organizations are, and that's why we showed a little bit of the demo to show how organizations are solving that today.
One more question.
Who are some of your customers?
Who are some of your customers?
Good. You want to pull up the slide?
We
We
can just
have
talk
enterprise customers, we have
Ericsson,
SMB
Simply Learn, KLA 10 Core.
Yeah,
Sony,
and it doesn't have to be.
Sony Music.
It doesn't have to be, we have many customers that just
Wind
have
Shuttle.
a single cloud environment. And although this is a very extensible platform and it touches in a lot of different areas, we have customers that just use it for a self-service and policy engine. Some that have CoreStack manage their full cloud lifecycle and don't log into the individual environment portals at all. So there's a mix and match.
Yeah, we have startups from all the way from, there's a customer that we just signed about 3 weeks ago, Tugobuzza, and they are an online delivery service of ethnic food. Very interesting startup, and they're using CoreStack to power their service and whatnot, all the way up to where Ericsson, right? They're using it globally in in 18 different divisions, to more mid-cap companies like Simply Learn. Simply Learn is an online training company. The thing that I like about CoreStack is it's actually a very extensible platform. We created this solution for online training companies and universities. It's zero-touch IT for Simply Learn. When somebody goes in and signs up for a Hadoop training class, it's a 6-week class. We actually, on the back end, CoreStack provisions the VM, the environment, everything that they need, sends all the credentials to the user. That user takes, as well as the material and curriculum, they take that 6-week class, and then we tear it down after 6 weeks. Simply Learn's IT does nothing, zero touch. Pretty slick.
That's a great use case.
Who would you view as your major competitors?
Well, we're doing things differently, but the folks that are in the CMP space are folks, RightScale, ScaleR, Jamcracker, CloudBolt. There's a couple others, Morpheus Data in the Bay Area. There's 810. Again, they're attaching it more from a tooling perspective, you know, and again, and they're a proprietary. They're looking at everything proprietary. We're a complete open system. Now we have core IP, you know, in the provisioning engine, security engine, and the governance, you know, our template building. But everything else, it's about utilizing everything that's out there, right? You know, again, when AWS came out with their security inspector, right? We integrated with that, right? We're not going out and creating, you know, another security product, right? When Azure had their security center came out, we integrated with that. So we're integrating these best of breed tools to help with the complete cloud lifecycle. So with that, we'd love to talk to you guys more about, you know, what we're doing, how we can help with that. But now what we like to do is give away a couple Echo Dots.
Right, and just coming back though to close, the partnership between Agitair and Cloud Enablers, we're a reseller for Cloud Enablers and CoreStack. We're giving away 1 free month of enterprise. They usually give 14-day trials. We've got a 1 free month trial. So if you're interested, this link is on the Cloud Talk site. Click on it, we'll come and talk to you. So now, Toddy, how many people do we have? 1 in 15.
There's more than 15 people here who didn't register.
Thank you. What, we did not get something that said that, yes, it went. How do we know the ...
It didn't say thank you?
Nope.
It should say thank you when you,
Really?
It's in very small print.
It's in really, really small print at the top.
Really small print. I had to look for it.
Yeah, we need to make it bigger.
Is any
Who didn't register?
we'll give some people a couple minutes if you want, or not, or I can choose 1 through 15. There's about 22 people here, so. Yes, no?
Some people are shy.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna choose. We're gonna choose 5. Who's 5?
John Meek.
There you go.
Okay, there's 1. You're welcome. Yeah, and then we're gonna
You just moved from Houston 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and then
You missed the storm by a week. That's
okay.
And then we're gonna do 14.
All right.
There we go.
Great.
Thank you everybody for attending.